Hello, people. Andrew here, talking about comics from a reader, collector, speculator, investor point of view. Today I'm talking about Classics Illustrated. The original one was released in 1941 and it was the idea behind by a Russian-born publisher by the name of Albert Louis Cantor. It ran for 169 issues, coming to an end in 1969. Although in the last couple of years there really wasn't a lot of printing. Most of the covers, well, the covers were line illustrations, and that changed with issue number 81 when they became painted covers. It was a fairly successful group of books. Parents didn't mind if they were going to pick up a comic book; they pick up one off the rack that had was part of the classics literature line, so that their kids at least were reading something of merit. It was a big thing, especially in the 50s, that comic books were detrimental and a cause of juvenile delinquency. Classics would have been a strong opponent against that juvenile delinquency. You could read a classic and appreciate it and not become a mugger and a thief. So it ran fairly well and did fine. Marvel released one in the 70s, a series of Classics Illustrated as well. But this is about the first publishing company that released 27 issues between 1990 and 91. They teamed up with Berkeley Books to do this particular series. I don't have all of them, but I'll talk about the ones we have and why I don't have all of them. So this is the very first one. And it's Edgar Allan Poe by The Raven and Other Poems. And it's illustrated by Gahan Wilson. So the thing about the Classics Illustrated is that I'm not so much interested in the stories themselves, because I'd rather read the book. But I am interested in the artwork and the interpretation from these artists. Gahan Wilson is not really known for comic books. He does magazine stuff, and he did things for Playboy, and he did for National Lampoon, and even this and the other one that I have that is by Gahan Wilson, who I do like. I mean, he has a ghoulish, macabre sense of style in his illustrations, and I love that kind of stuff. So I really look forward to seeing any of his material. In this particular one, it's rather than panel by panel, it's like a single shot, and then there's the poem or a fraction of that poem that is illustrated with that particular image. So it's one of the few times that you can find Gahan Wilson in actual comic book form. So I appreciate that because I like Gahan Wilson. As I say, most of these stories I've read before. I was talking to a couple of friends of mine. One is a retired teacher and one is still an active teacher. And I asked them, do they read classics in school today between the grades of 6 and 8? And the answer was no. There's no communal reading material. They're allowed to choose their own book because you don't want to stifle their individuality and force them to read a book that they maybe not be particularly interested in. I don't think that I agree with that particular philosophy. I think that the shared experience of a book is important and unites kids together. It also helps to develop a way to critique books and examine them. If you're all from the same page, then when you're talking about a theme or an idea, you can all see that on the same page, on the same book. And so you can get a better understanding of what the instructor is talking about, but I guess that sounds too much like learning. So this was the first one. Kyle Baker doing Alice in Wonderland. This one's issue number 3. I've already seen some Alice in Wonderland thing. Again, this could be a thing to collect as all of the Alice in Wonderland books or variations of, because Leela Dowling did one, an adaptation. Her artwork is featured in The Dreamery when she does about six issues or so adapting Alice in Wonderland. And again, I'm here for the artwork to see what they come up with as opposed to the story, what they leave in and what they leave out. It was interesting. Again, I was reading a little bit of a comment about Classics Illustrated, and the person writing the piece said that it's very odd that you would take a book, say, like Alice in Wonderland, and it's got to fit into X amount of pages. And then you take a book like Great Expectations, and it's got to fit into the same amount of pages. So the difficult. How do you account for that? How there's a discrepancy in the amount of text. And my son said that just goes to show that the longer book doesn't need as much, is more fluff because you can tell the same story in the same amount of pages. I thought about that for a second. I thought, no, you're wrong. It's just a question of what has to be left out of a story, and you're not going to get the complete story unless you read the book. But that's also an interesting thing about a Classics Illustrated, again, because of that very reason, what choices the artist and writer made in regards to what to leave in and what to leave out. Same thing applies to a movie. Is when you see a movie adaptation of a book, somebody says, "Well, they left this out, they left that out." Yes. So what did they keep in, and what did they keep out? And much like movies always say, "Well, the book is better." It's the same thing with Classics Illustrated. The book is better. But if it prompts you to read the book, then it's done. Part of its job is to do that. Is to encourage you to read the actual book. Here's another one that shows up an awful lot. This is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by is it Mark Snyder or John Snyder? I think it's John Snyder. Issue number 8. Another character, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, that's been showing up throughout a number of books. I saw it in Supernatural Thrillers. There was an adaptation of that in one of those issues. Mr. Hyde is a Marvel character, Mr. Hyde. There's also in the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, you'll see Mr. Hyde show up there. Again, maybe an interesting collection to collect the variations of Jekyll and Hyde. And I was thinking I might do at some point in time just that, break down some of the books that are in there. Tom Sawyer, I love the book Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn. And this is illustrated by Mike Ploog, again another artist that I really like. Very happy to see his adaptation of this particular book. Mike Ploog does a lot of storyboarding, and that's sort of what you're looking at there is somewhat of a storyboard of Tom Sawyer. One of my favorite H.G. Wells stories, The Island of Dr. Moreau. This one is unmarked as to what number. I think it's number 12. I could be mistaken. But I do like The Island of Dr. Moreau. That's all I have to say about that. Again, this is another Gahan Wilson story. It's the Devil's Dictionary. So they have basically it's a dictionary, and there's funny takes on some of the words, and it was actually. It's not something that you would necessarily sit down and just read page by page by page. You could do that, of course, but it is a dictionary, and it's something that you might want to flip through, read a few words and the way that it's described through this particular dictionary. And it's usually with some of it's tongue in cheek and some of it's sarcastic and ironic, but it was a fun read to go through from time to time, and again illustrated by Gahan Wilson, so I'm happy about that as well. Here's another character that keeps showing up, and this is by Rick Geary. He's doing The Invisible Man. Rick Geary I like as well. He's an odd character. I've read some of his stuff, and it really seems sort of disjointed. So here he's actually got to string it together to make it a viable story. And I like what he did here with The Invisible Man. I'd like to, perhaps it's a different sort of, not cartoonish, but it's along those sort of lines. And if this prompts anybody to read The Invisible Man, it's a good thing, because that too is another excellent book. Most of these are they're classics, so they are good books. Here's a book that I've never actually read, The Jungle Book. I've only, I read this. I really liked the artwork in this one as well. I thought this was good. I thought it was, and it did what it was supposed to do. After I finished reading this, and I haven't picked it up yet, but I'm inspired to read the Jungle Book, the actual Jungle Book, because I've seen the film, and that's about as close as I got to reading this. I read some of Rudyard Kipling's other story, Kim, but I have never read the Jungle Book. So I think it's time that I find a copy and read it, because I found what was being said. It's different than what you would see in the film, obviously in the Disney film or any of the Disney films. Um, but it's, as I said, does what it's supposed to do. It inspires me to read the Jungle Book. The last one I have in this particular collection, I only have 9 of the 27, is Aesop's Fables, and I like this one too. I thought Aesop's Fables was a lot of fun, and again, shorter stories, and there's a kind of a fun illustration to it as well. A good story, a good book overall. This one's issue 26, so it's the penultimate of the series. So, is it worth a read? Yeah, it is for the artwork. If you like the artists that are, and they're all quality artists. I like all of the art that I've seen in all of these books. The only one that I'm missing that I would really like to get is the Moby Dick one, because that's by Bill Sienkiewicz. Is that, yeah, Sienkiewicz. Bill Sienkiewicz. I keep getting it. I pronounce his name wrong. Bill Sienkiewicz. I'd like to see that particular work, Moby Dick. As for the other ones, I'm not. Am I going to collect this series? I have 9 of the 27, and the truth is, I bought all of these at, you guessed it, at a dollar bin. Will they still show up in dollar bins? Well, this is from the 90s, and again, hard to say. I don't think stores ordered too many copies of this. They're a little bit more expensive, and they didn't find their way into actual bookstores. So there may not be a ton of these around. A dollar bin may be stretching it, but it may not, because it's not popular amongst the superhero, Marvel, DC, Dark Horse, Image crowd. So they may still be lingering in some of those dollar bins. So would I try to collect this thing and get all 27 issues if I had to start spending, $5 to $10 per issue? And the answer would be no, other than the Moby Dick one, which I'm interested in. I'm not that interested in the collection, but I would look at it if I found them in the dollar bin. So that would be my recommendation as far as that's concerned, is if you find 1 or 2 of these in a dollar bin, pick one up. Take a look at it and see if you like it. As far as speculation is concerned, or investment, I would say no to either one of those. There's nothing new here as far as characters and development, just the different interpretations of classic stories, which is a lot of fun in and of itself. But I would not want to spend a lot of money just for that version of fun. As I said, you can find variations of many of these characters in many different books, and unless you're really hooked onto that particular character and you want to track down all of the variations of that story, I would just pick this up randomly from time to time when I see one at a reasonable price. They're not going to be worth a ton of money as time goes on. And as I said, you could probably still find these in dollar bins. But fun nonetheless. Overall, yeah, pick it up for the, if you haven't read these stories, as I said, the Jungle Book one inspired me, so maybe you had some ideas. I was thinking about reading The Invisible Man, but I'm not sure what the story's about, and maybe you'll pick this one up, and you read The Invisible Man and say, hey, I would like to read the whole story. This was with me with Jungle Book, as I think that, yeah, I've seen the film, but yeah, definitely want to read the book. So yeah, it's good for the art, good for stories that you may not have read, not so much on the speculation and investment. Well, thanks for listening. We'll talk again soon.